Moments ago, U.S. Apache helicopters were deployed over the Strait of Hormuz following escalating threats.
Can you confirm reports that multiple Iranian drone waves have already been intercepted and that Apache units are now operating in continuous rotation over the strait?
Yes. Apache units are actively engaging hostile threats in real time.
Maybe even longer. The most feared attack helicopter ever built is now circling the narrow waters. Iran promised to shut down dozens of AH-64 Apaches armed with Hellfire missiles, thermal targeting systems locked on, and orders to destroy anything that threatens passage. Iran spent years building a blockade plan around the Strait of Hormuz, mines, fast boats, coastal missiles. But what happens when the one weapon you never planned for is now hunting you from above? Welcome in, Channel Connection. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. If this channel has become a place where you come to understand what the world is really doing and why it matters, then please think about subscribing. It takes 1 second, it costs nothing, and it helps this channel keep bringing you the stories that big news outlets skip. Now, before we begin, leave a comment and tell us where you are you're watching from today. The Strait of Hormuz has never been a quiet place, but what is happening there right now is something Iran never expected to face. Deep inside a military base in the United Arab Emirates, rows of AH-64 Apache attack helicopters sit under the desert sun. Ground crews move between them without stopping. Fuel lines are connected. Ammunition is loaded. Weapon systems are checked and checked again. The work does not stop, not in the day, not in the night. These machines are being prepared for one mission and one mission only: fly into the Strait of Hormuz, find Iranian threats, and destroy them before they can do any damage. The reason for this huge operation is simple. Iran has been sending waves of Shahed drones into the strait. These drones have been targeting American military bases, Allied positions across the Gulf, and commercial oil tankers trying to pass through the waterway. The attacks have been nonstop, and the United States has answered with something Iran did not plan for: a helicopter force that hunts from above all day and all night without stopping. The Apache is not just any helicopter. It is the most feared attack helicopter on Earth. Each one carries 4 pods of Hydra 70 rockets, for a total of 76 unguided rockets on each aircraft. Under the nose sits a 30-millimeter chain gun loaded with high explosive rounds made to rip apart anything in its path. And mounted on the stub wings, AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, laser-guided weapons first built to destroy tanks and armored vehicles, but now being used to take out drones and coastal threats in the Persian Gulf. Yet every few hours, the cycle repeats. Some Apaches lift off from the base and fly straight into the strait to patrol. Others fly to American naval ships in Gulf waters, landing on the flight decks where they sit on standby. Engines cold, but crews ready. The rotation never stops. Helicopters heading out, helicopters coming back, helicopters waiting on the decks of warships, ready to launch at a moment's notice. When Iranian drones appear, the response is fast. Radar operators deep inside the Combat Information Center of a Navy ship detect the incoming contacts first. They mark them as hostile within seconds. The data is sent at once to the Apache crews, whether they are already in the air in the patrol zone or sitting on the flight deck waiting for the call. Pilots on the deck start their engines and lift off within minutes. Those already flying turn hard toward the threat. The Apaches move in, lock onto the targets using their onboard sensors, and open fire. The drones are hit, they fall from the sky, and the strait stays open. This is not one single operation. This is not a temporary response. The American military has made it clear that its power in the region is growing every single day. While Iran's power is being worn down with every strike, more than 7,000 targets across Iran and its military infrastructure have already been hit, and the number keeps rising. Each day brings a bigger strike package than the day before. Each day, Iran loses more of what it built over decades. The base in the UAE has become the heart of this effort. After every mission, the Apaches return and the ground crews go right back to work. Though rocket pods are pulled off and replaced with fresh ones, the chain gun ammo drums are refilled with new belts of explosive rounds. Hellfire missiles are slid back onto the rail launchers. Electrical connectors are plugged in, and the mounting is locked in place. Within hours, sometimes less, the same helicopter is back in the air. Iran built its whole Hormuz strategy around one idea that it could close the strait and choke the world's oil supply whenever it wanted. Mines, fast boats, coastal missiles, that was the plan. But no one in Tehran planned for this. No one planned for a force that never stops flying, never stops watching, and never stops firing. That is the reality now, and it is a reality Iran has no answer for. For years, Tehran built its whole strait strategy around three pillars. You have fast attack boats that could swarm enemy ships in large numbers, naval mines that could be dropped quietly into shipping lanes under the cover of darkness, and coastal anti-ship missile batteries hidden along the Iranian shoreline, ready to fire at anything that moved through the choke point. This was the plan. This was what Iran spent billions building. And on paper, it looked dangerous enough to keep the whole world worried. But the AH-64 Apache was not part of Iran's plan. The Apache does not work like a fighter jet racing across the sky at high altitude. It flies low, sometimes just a few dozen feet above the water. It moves fast when it needs to, but it can also hover in one place, completely still, watching, scanning, waiting. Its sensors can detect heat from miles away. Its targeting systems can lock onto a small boat in rough seas or a drone flying low and guide a missile straight into it with laser precision. There is no hiding from this machine. The fast boats Iran depended on, the ones built to overwhelm warships by attacking in groups of 10 or 20 at once, are now exposed. An Apache flying above the strait can see them the moment they leave port. The thermal imaging systems on board pick up the engine heat before the boats even reach open water, and once they are spotted, the chain gun opens up from a distance the boat crews cannot even see. 30-millimeter explosive rounds tear through fiberglass hulls like paper. A single Apache can hit many boats in one pass. A pair of Apaches working together can destroy a whole swarm before it ever reaches a convoy. The mines are an even bigger problem for Iran now. Laying naval mines needs small vessels moving slowly through shipping lanes, usually at night. But the Apache carries forward-looking infrared sensors that turn darkness into daylight. Mine-laying boats that once moved freely under the cover of night are now visible, glowing white-hot on the Apache's targeting screen. The helicopter crew spots them, reports their position, and either attacks directly or calls in naval forces to intercept. The mining operations Iran counted on to shut down the strait have been crippled, not by ships patrolling the water, but by helicopters patrolling the sky. And then there are the coastal missiles. Iran placed anti-ship missile launchers along its southern coastline precisely because they could threaten any ship moving through the narrow strait. But the Hellfire missile mounted on the Apache was first built to kill tanks on a battlefield. A stationary missile launcher sitting on a hillside is an even easier target. The Apache can fly low, stay under radar coverage, approach from an angle the launcher cannot track, and fire a Hellfire from several kilometers away. The launcher is destroyed before its crew even knows the helicopter is there. What makes this situation worse for Iran is the rotation. This is not a small handful of helicopters flying a few missions and going home. The American military has built a nonstop cycle that never breaks. Apaches launch from the UAE base, fly to the strait or to Navy ships, complete their patrol or intercept mission, return to refuel and rearm, and another Apache takes their place right away. There is no gap. There is no window. There is no moment when the sky above the strait is empty And when an Apache is damaged or needs major maintenance, a replacement arrives inside a C-17 cargo aircraft. The helicopter is partly taken apart for transport, rotor blades removed, tail section detached, stub wings folded. The C-17 lands at the nearest airstrip. The Apache is rolled off the ramp, towed to the assembly area, and within hours, mechanics have it fully rebuilt, armed, and cleared for flight. The pipeline of replacement aircraft makes sure the number of Apaches in the rotation never drops. Iran's commanders are watching all of this. They can see the patrols. They can hear the rotors. They know that every fast boat leaving port is being tracked. Every mine-laying vessel is being watched. And every coastal launcher becomes a target the moment it powers up. You know, the strategy that was supposed to hold the world hostage is being taken apart piece by piece by a helicopter Iran never planned to fight, the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, that red circle meant one thing: risk. It meant that at any moment, Iran could decide to choke the global economy by shutting down the most important oil passage on Earth. Roughly 20% of the world's petroleum supply passes through that narrow channel every single day. Tankers carrying millions of barrels of crude oil squeeze through a shipping lane barely 2 miles wide in some places. One disruption, one blockade, one conflict, and oil prices do not just rise, they explode. That fear shaped everything. It shaped how governments negotiated with Tehran. It shaped how oil companies priced their cargo. It shaped how insurance companies calculated their premiums for any ship entering the Persian Gulf. And most importantly, it gave Iran leverage, huge leverage, the kind of leverage that allowed Tehran to sit at negotiating tables with world powers and say very quietly, very calmly, remember what happens if we close the strait. But that leverage is fading now. And the reason is circling above the water at 200 feet. The deployment of AH-64 Apaches over the Strait of Hormuz has not just changed the military situation. It has changed the economic equation. Oil markets react to fear before they react to facts. And right now, the fear is shifting. Traders who once priced in a permanent Hormuz risk premium are starting to recalculate. If Iran cannot launch its fast boats without them being destroyed before reaching open water, if mine-laying operations are being spotted and stopped from the air, if coastal missile batteries are being picked off by Hellfire strikes, then the blockade threat starts to lose its bite. That does not mean oil prices have dropped. They have not. The conflict itself is still pushing prices higher because of the wider instability across the region. But the specific premium tied to a Hormuz closure, the extra dollars per barrel that traders added only because Iran might shut the strait, now that number is starting to shrink. And in global energy markets, even a small change in risk can move billions of dollars. For the Gulf states, this Apache deployment carries a different kind of meaning. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar depend on the strait staying open. Their whole economic survival runs through that channel. For years, they invested heavily in their own defenses and relied on the American naval presence to keep the waterway secure. But naval ships alone were never a full solution. Ships are large, slow to move, and open to exactly the kind of uneven attacks Iran was best at. The Apache changes that equation. It adds a layer of protection that works above the water faster than any boat, more agile than any ship, and able to hit threats that surface vessels simply cannot reach in time. For Iran, the consequences go beyond military losses. Iran's whole regional influence was built partly on the belief that it could cause unacceptable economic damage to the world whenever it chose. That belief kept sanctions talks alive. It kept diplomatic channels open even when relations were at their worst. Foreign ministers from Europe and Asia would quietly admit that Iran's Hormuz card was always in the back of their minds during every round of talks. Now that card is being neutralized, not through diplomacy, not through sanctions, but through raw military power deployed directly over the choke point itself. And that creates a political problem inside Iran that is harder to solve than any military one. If the leadership in Tehran can no longer credibly threaten to close the strait, then its bargaining position weakens on every front. Nuclear talks, regional proxy discussions, economic relief talks, all of them lose force when the other side knows the biggest threat has been diffused. China is watching this closely as well. Beijing imports a huge share of its crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Any closure would wreck Chinese energy security within weeks. For years, China quietly supported Iran's diplomatic positions, partly because a stable Hormuz meant stable oil supplies. But now, Beijing faces a new calculation. If the United States can keep the strait open by force, and if Iran's ability to threaten it has clearly been weakened, then China's strategic interest in backing Tehran becomes smaller, not publicly, not right away, but slowly, in the way global alliances always shift through quiet recalculations made in rooms the public never sees. The Apache did not just change the battlefield above the water, it changed the boardrooms, the trading floors, and the foreign ministries thousands of miles away from the strait itself. There is an old saying among military strategists that the weapon that wins a war is not always the biggest or the most expensive. It is the one your enemy never prepared for. Iran prepared for warships. It prepared for fighter jets. It prepared for submarines and cruise missiles and satellite surveillance. Decades of planning went into building a defense network designed to counter the most powerful navy on Earth inside the tight waters of the Persian Gulf. But nobody in Tehran, not the generals, not the admirals, not the defense planners who spent their careers studying American tactics, prepared for a fleet of attack helicopters that would simply refuse to leave the sky. And that is the detail that changes everything going forward. The AH-64 Apache is not new technology. It has been in service since the 1980s. It fought in the first Gulf War. It flew over Iraq and Afghanistan for 2 decades. Military analysts around the world know exactly what it can do. But knowing what a weapon can do and being able to stop it are two very different things. Iran has no reliable answer for a helicopter that flies low enough to avoid radar, moves fast enough to outrun small boats, hovers long enough to watch an entire coastline, and carries enough firepower to destroy dozens of targets in a single mission. There is no Iranian system now in place that can consistently track and attack an Apache operating over open water at night. That gap is not going to close quickly. Building effective counter-helicopter defenses takes years of research, testing, manufacturing, and training. Iran does not have years. It does not even have months. Every day the Apaches patrol the strait, Iran's blockade ability erodes even more. Equipment is destroyed, tactics are exposed, crews are lost, and the intelligence American forces gather during every single flight, the radar signatures, the patrol routes of Iranian vessels, the locations of hidden launchers, all of that data makes the next mission even more effective than the last. The question now is not whether Iran can close the Strait of Hormuz. That question for the near future has been answered. The question is what Iran does next. There are several possibilities. Iran could try to shift its strategy farther away from the strait, focusing instead on proxy attacks through groups in Yemen, Iraq, or Lebanon to pressure American interests elsewhere. Yet it could invest heavily in longer-range missile systems designed to strike targets beyond the reach of the Apache patrols. Or it could turn inward, focusing on air defense upgrades and electronic warfare abilities that might one day give it the power to challenge the skies over the Gulf again. But every one of those options takes time, and time is something the current situation is not giving Iran much of. For viewers watching this unfold around the world, there are a few things worth watching closely in the weeks ahead. First, watch the oil markets. If the Hormuz risk premium keeps falling, it will show that global traders believe the blockade threat is truly fading. That has huge effects on fuel prices, inflation, and economic policy in every major country on Earth. Second, watch Iran's diplomatic language. When Iran stops threatening to close the strait in its official statements, that will be the clearest sign that the leadership has privately accepted that the ability is no longer believable. Governments rarely announce their losses in public. They simply stop making claims they can no longer prove. Third, watch China. Beijing's relationship with Tehran has always been transactional at its core. If China starts pulling back from Iran on energy policy or reduces its diplomatic support in international forums, it will mean that the calculations inside the Chinese government have shifted. And when China moves even a little, the whole geopolitical landscape shifts with it. The Strait of Hormuz is still dangerous. The conflict is not over. Drones are still being launched. Missiles are still being fired. And American pilots are still flying into hostile airspace every single day to keep the world's most important waterway open. But something basic has changed. The sky above the strait, the one Iran always assumed would belong to no one, now belongs to the Apache, and it does not seem ready to give it back. This has been reporting for this channel. If this story helped you understand what is really happening in the Strait of Hormuz, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you have not already, and stay close to this channel because the next chapter of this story is already being written.